Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Claire Kilner, Head of Alumni at the University of Manchester, and I'm here to welcome you to Whitworth Hall for this special event to celebrate the inspiring women that are connected to Manchester on today, International Women's Day. I'm just here to do a little bit of housekeeping as well. Can I start by asking you to ensure that your phones are turned off or on silent, please? And just to let you know that there are bathrooms in the building through this door to the left or through the back of the hall and down the stairs. We're also not expecting a fire drill tonight, so if the alarm sounds, it's real, and staff will be on hand to escort you out of the building and into the safety of the quadrangle. We will have members of the audience live tweeting, and if you'd like to join in, the hashtag for this evening's event is hashtag IWDU, all uppercase, O lowercase, M uppercase. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce tonight's panel members. Professor Dame Nancy Rothwell is our President and Vice-Chancellor at the University. She became President and Vice-Chancellor in July 2010, the first woman to lead the University of Manchester, or either of its two predecessor institutions. She is currently co-chair of the Prime Minister's Council for Science and Technology, a Royal Society Council member, a Deputy Lieutenant for Greater Manchester, Chair of Corridor Manchester Board, and a member of the Greater Manchester Local Enterprise Partnership, LEP Board. To her right is Ms. Jeanette Farty, OBE. Jeanette is one of the UK's top entrepreneurs and is passionate about making a difference and improving people's life chances. Through her former business, Avanta Enterprises Limited, thousands of people have been helped back to work or to start businesses. She was awarded an OBE in 2010 for her services to unemployed people and to entrepreneurship. Sitting beside her is Professor Margo Rosier, OBE, QC, FBA, FMed Sci. Margo is one of the foremost medical lawyers in the UK. She has an international reputation, not only for the quality of her legal scholarship, but also for her role in medical science regulation. She has chaired numerous bodies, including the Nuffield Council on Bioethics Working Party, the Retained Organs Commission, and the Review of Surrogacy Arrangements. And furthest away from me, last but definitely not least, is Na Aqua, General Secretary of the Students' Union. As Gen Sec, Na is the principal representative of the Students' Union and has lead responsibility for union strategy and development. She is currently studying for a Master's in International Relations. Welcome, ladies. I'd like to now hand over to Nancy.
So thank you very much indeed, Claire, and a very warm welcome to the University and in particular to this event. It's fantastic to see so many people here. In fact, if we have many more late arrivals, they'll be sitting on the floor. It's also great to see a mixture of women and men here. All too often at events about women, the audiences are largely women, so welcome gentlemen as well as ladies. It's unusual for me to be sitting here because I'm normally up there facing this way, and I realise that normally those in the audience get a much better view than I do up there because I'm facing the fantastic organ in this great Whitworth Hall. So this is a fairly, yes, if you haven't looked, please do have a look before you leave. So if you, I'm going to just ask the panel a few questions. This is going to be a fairly informal event, and we haven't rehearsed what they're going to say, so I have no idea. And then there will be time for a few questions, and then, of course, there'll be a reception afterwards. So let me begin. Today is International Women's Day, and since 1908, that's over 100 years, it's been seeking to globally celebrate the achievements of women in its call to action for gender parity, such that there is no difference between men and women in their aspirations, their opportunities, and their achievements. This year, International Women's Day is asking people to pledge one of the following statements. And I think you've got a copy of these, and you might want to think which ones you would want to pledge. I'm going to read them out, and our panellists have them in advance, and I'm going to ask them which one and briefly why. So the 5 that we're asked to pledge is to help women and girls achieve their ambitions, challenge conscious and unconscious bias, call for gender-balanced leadership, value women and men's contributions equally, and create inclusive flexible cultures. Quite a mouthful. But anyway, so I'm going to ask first, Jeanette, which of these would you choose to pledge to?
I think it's a bit difficult really. Some of them aren't that different, but I think probably the one about equality of inclusiveness in every aspect of our society and our culture. It's not just about, but I think in order to achieve that, I think really we have to rethink how we support women to actually push that agenda as well as we push men from the other end, if you see what I mean.
Margo.
Mine would be to help women and girls with their ambitions. I think it's really, really important that we try to ensure that people's own dreams are met. I think for a very long time, and it occurs to men as well as to women, women have had their life course to some extent dictated or laid out for them. So I remember when I was about 12 at some kind of family gathering, an acquaintance of my parents said, "Now what are you going to do? I suppose you'll be a teacher like your aunties." I had millions of aunties and they were all teachers. And I said, "No, I'm going to do law. I'm going to be a lawyer." At which he harumphed and said to my father, "Don't waste your money on the lass." Unfortunately, my father rejected that and gave me absolutely every support to achieve my ambition to be a lawyer and succeed in academic life. I think it's important to look at what people want for two reasons. I've had a couple of instances which have really made me think in relation to my own personal students, and I think this can be anonymised. I'll take the first one. A young woman who'd done very well at school, very unhappy, obviously doing a law degree, not doing well, and I couldn't work out what was wrong. And suddenly I noticed that she had a very beautiful dress on, and I just mentioned it to her, and she said, "I made it myself. That's what I really want to do. I want to do dress design." But Mum, who was a solicitor, and Dad, who was a doctor, said, "No, you don't want to do, you want to have a proper profession." So it's equally important to assist her in achieving her ambitions. I also think it's terribly important for women of my age to listen more to young women. We grew up in a very, very different atmosphere to ours. It's very easy to think what was good for me is going to be good for you, and that's just not the case. So it's listening to women. It's also listening to men, because if women are forced into one form of sort of straitjacket, then men have exactly the same problem, sometimes the other way.
Thank you. So Noah, which one are you choosing?
So I was torn between either challenging conscious and unconscious bias or creative or inclusive cultures. But I kind of think challenging conscious and unconscious biases is really the foundation of all of it, because we can empower women, we can get them to all the careers they want to, but if we're not, as a society, challenging the stereotypes beneath them and the cultures that we've created, we're always going to perpetrate the same things. So I agree, it's those kind of, we're in a different era at the moment, and I think we're more progressive, we see things more, and we have to be constantly saying, that's not okay. Actually, we've moved past that in society, and if you're not choosing to kind of uphold these values as well, you have to really think hardly about what you're saying and what you're doing. So for me, it's challenging conscious and unconscious.
Thank you. So I wasn't asked the question, but I'll offer an answer anyway. But I would actually add to the first one, because it's not just about helping women realise their ambitions, it's about raising those ambitions. It's about realising they can achieve things that they might not previously have dreamt of. So it's about getting women and men to be more ambitious. So now I'd like to ask a slightly provocative question of each of you in your own context. And Jeanette with a very strong background in business. And so I'm going to ask, do you think women make better business leaders?
I was once asked this question on a radio programme, and I listened to it back later, and you can hear a deep intake of breath as I thought about it, because the only other people in the room were men.
Normally the case.
I think women make different business leaders, and that's not to say that we need difference, but we also need the sort of skills that women bring to business that often, sadly, men don't. And it's women, I've had a privilege over many years of working with lots of teams of women, and what I find is that women want to work together, they want to get the job done together, they're not fussy about ego, they just want to get the job done. And that sort of is a 21st century approach to business. Business is no longer just about the boss coming in the morning saying, you do this and you do this. It's actually much more about teamwork. And women are ideally placed. Unfortunately, we haven't convinced the rest of the workforce that that's where the 21st and maybe 22nd century is going. And but that's what it is. In any modern thing, if you're looking at some the projects that are done in the university, but Nancy's management team, I'm sure it's the same, you need those different skills. Unfortunately, because people always think about leadership, you know, if I said to you, what leader springs to your mind? I guarantee that most of you think, because it was on telly last week, Winston Churchill, you might think Richard Branson, and it takes a long time to get you to start to think of a woman leader in any part of society. But there are huge numbers of women who I've learnt from, you know, somebody like Julia Cleverden, for example, at Business in the Community, who actually changed my life by saying to me, what is your aspiration? And actually saying to me, have you any idea how good you are? And I was just plodding along, doing a job, thinking that everybody was like me. And she said, no, you've got to look at yourself. And that's part of the problem. It's about that confidence in your own ability that makes that difference. So I can guarantee if I'm interviewing for a job and a man comes in and a woman comes in, the man will say, I am brilliant at X. And the woman will come in and say, I know a little bit about it. Where actually it's probably the other way round. So somehow we're not quite good at bragging about what we're good at. It's that confidence issue. But back to the question, do women make better business leaders? Well, for me, actually, probably in the sort of work I've done over the years, working with communities, working with people, I have to say yes, really. Sorry, guys.
So interesting you talk about women leaders. Think of this city and this university. Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughter Christabel, the first law student at this university. Mary Stopes, who was here. Hugh McFarlane, Ellen Wilkinson. You know, amazing female leaders. So this is a barbed question for Margo. Do women make better academic leaders? Be careful how you answer, Margo.
Absolutely not. Rubbish, I'm afraid. It's going to sound as though I was just copying Jeanette, but I had written this down. I think women make different sorts of leaders. I'd want to make a difference in terms of academic life between leadership and management. They're not exactly the same thing. Managers have to lead, but there are many other people who are leaders who won't necessarily be managers. I think there's a spectrum of leadership styles, and that more women are on one end of the spectrum, which is very much, as Jeanette was saying, the facilitative end, trying to encourage people, trying to bring the best out of them, trying to get people to see what they can do, be they men or women. Because there are men who are reticent, and actually I think life is even harder for them than it is for reticent women, because they're kind of challenging the mode. I think another thing I think about women in academic life and women leaders is that the importance, I think, that many of them place on people enjoying their job. A few years ago I had a fabulous team that was mostly, not entirely women. I think we had about 14 people and 3 men and 11 women. And we regularly had meetings in my office. And we had a new head of school who always seemed to want to see me about something very important when I was having a meeting. And he said to me on one occasion, he said, well, I don't know what sort of business you get done in those meetings of yours. Whenever I come in, you're all in gales of laughter and you're drinking coffee and eating lots of cake. And we got an awful lot done. We didn't, I think, have the same boundaries, perhaps, and maybe sometimes that's a bad thing, between personal life and enjoying each other's company and social life and getting on with the job. But we did get the job done. Now, there are some men who are very good facilitative leaders. I've known some women, not now, of course, Vice President, in this university, who are very dictatorial. You will do this, you will do that, you will do the other. So I think there are differences. I think that the combination of different styles of leadership is probably something that within an organisation, within a law school, within a university, is very much to be welcomed and very much to be valued, as long as nobody takes a very prescriptive view that, you know, my way is best, and if you're not doing it the way that it would have been done 40 years ago when this law school was a law school and had proper law professors, all of whom were men, you're doing something wrong.
Thank you. And now, student leaders.
Of course I'm going to have to say yes. Am I on?
I think so.
Okay, of course I'm going to say yes. I think especially with student leaders, you have to somehow represent a really diverse group of people. No students are the same. There's no such thing as an average student. Everyone's got their different backgrounds. They're maybe an international student, they're from down the road. They've got different aspirations, and somehow you have to bring those all together. And as the other women have said before, women are very good at facilitating those conversations, very good at being like, this is what you're passionate about, go for it. Well, I would hope so. With all the women I've met so far, we've really been able to bring out the things that they're passionate about, the things that they want to do, that they might not see in themselves. and be able to facilitate that as a leader. It's interesting because at this university and this union, we've always had a really strong women's campaign. So we're the first union to have a women's officer. And I think, well, that's remnant because back in the day there was a separate men's union and a separate women's union, and they got brought together and they were like, no, the women can have an officer. So they got felt like their union got taken away. And I think that's something that's really strong, kind of female leadership and having a lot of women having their voices heard is really important because it's not like that in every other society. I think student movement actually creates a bit of a microcosm of what you would hope society can really be, like really diverse, loads of different voices, women being at the forefront of it. And so having women as leaders in the student movement I think is actually pivotal, really, really important to make sure that we kind of bring up aspirations of all the kind of other students and other young people that are about. So yeah, I think they are.
Thank you. So I was with a group of students today in one of our schools, and I asked them why they chose Manchester, and of course there were standard reasons about they liked the course, research standing, etc. One of them said because it's a multicultural university and a multicultural city, and then a girl, probably to please me, said because you have a female vice-chancellor. So I said, you'll go far, for sure. So coming on to some more specific things, I mean, my field is science, and I, like you, Margo, was encouraged by my parents to follow whatever I wanted to do, although nearly veered off into art. And as a scientist, you tend to be always in a minority, less so in life sciences as I am than in engineering. But, you know, why do you think we still have this divide? I mean, Jeanette, you know, you've come through that route. Do you feel that is still there, that science is for boys and arts are for girls, and can we change it?
I came from what would be quite easily described as a working class area, and my parents actually both left school at a very young age. In fact, my mother left school at 13 at the outbreak of war when they were allowed to go into war work instead of being at school. And my father just ran away to sea at 15. Neither of them had much education. So they weren't really able to offer me any guidance or support about what you did at school. They were just happy I was going and occasionally not going. And they didn't find out too much about that. But so I don't know. I really was one of these classic people who went to an all-girls grammar school, which was fantastic. And in fact, I made sure my two daughters also went to an all-girls.
Can we just check, did we all go to an all-girls school?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there's something about it. Yeah.
I've done straw polls of women in leadership, and I would say about 80% of them went to all-girls schools.
Loved it.
But according to the headmaster of Brighton College, we're quite incapable of socialising with men.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well,
I don't know if you'd realise that, ladies.
Oh, I don't think I'd
Well,
agree
you've had
with
a
that.
drink, we can talk about that. Yes. But so I was never very good at maths. Actually, that was always my weakness until I discovered that really much later on it was all about adding up, really. And I didn't really understand that at school, and the school maths teachers were all men, and I didn't get it, and I was left behind, really. So I never really took on the science route, which is a great pity, because I found later in life I just didn't know enough. But then I think in those days, science and technology was a bit boring. The way it was taught, the way my school put it forward, we had a very strong contingent of girls who did 3 sciences, including Beverly Hughes, one of your previous local MPs, who was a head girl at my school. So they had a very strong cohort of girls doing science. We didn't really have technology in those days, thinking about it, but we had the science. And I think, you know, we look now at what's happening to try and encourage more girls into science. And it really is about, I think, it's about making it more about the world they live in rather than about pure maths or more arcane sort of things. It's about giving it a context.
So, you raise a very, very important point, which I think is the passion of teachers. This is, for many people, what drove them into their careers. I don't know if any of you heard Desert Island Discs on Sunday, but it was Dame Sue Eon, a member of our board, who I did maths, physics and chemistry with at school. She went into nuclear engineering, I went into life sciences, but clearly we had outstanding teachers, both of us in the same class. But Margo, I mean, the legal profession is often called a boys' club, and it certainly has been in the past. Do you think that's changing?
It is changing, but very slowly and not perhaps in entirely the right places. The law school looks completely different from the school I joined when I came as a young undergraduate, where there were 90 students and 9 women. and 2 female members of staff. I think we're up to nearly 50% of female members of staff, and we have far more girls than we have boys actually doing law. The young women, generally, not entirely, do much, much better at the beginning of their careers. They take far more of the glittering prizes in terms of getting the really good training contracts, the really good pupilages. It's absolutely fabulous. And then it still seems to change. There are still relatively few women who are full partners in the big solicitors' practices. There are still fewer women who are Queen's Counsel. And of course, in relation to the judiciary, we have 1 woman on the Supreme Court. If you look at Canada and Australia and New Zealand, they have had women on the Supreme Court for decades. They would think it ridiculous if they didn't have more than 3 or 4. One of the things that worries me about the law, and I think sometimes it's the case of business, is this sort of, we've got a woman. One of the other Supreme Court justices who was saying, we must never, never think of quota and targets. We mustn't think of, in some way, diluting the purity of academic brilliance, which I have and the other males have. I don't know whether he gets on very well with Lady Hale. There is this assumption that somehow women aren't that good. And if you've got one, he said, and we have a woman, we have Lady Hale. Well, we won't always have Lady Hale. She'll have to go in 2 or 3 years because she'll reach the age at which she has to go, and she's not protected by age discrimination. So I really, really worry that in 40 years' time, young women are going to be told what I was told. And 40 years ago, I sat at a dinner in the Middle Temple, very bolshy young woman talking about how it was really, really important we should have more women in the Court of Appeal, more women in the House of Lords, which of course then was the highest court in the country. And I was sort of patted on the head and told, my dear, it will happen. More women are coming into the profession. More women will rise to the top. There is no need for quotas. There's no need for a campaign. It will happen. It hasn't happened. And I don't have the confidence that if we just sit here and wait for it to happen, it's going to happen at all.
So that leads interestingly on to what I was going to ask now, which is last year there were 2,000 more female graduates of this university than there were men. Cause for great hope. If you move on to lecturers, the difference is not so bad. As you go up to professor, it's about 25% women. As you go more senior in most of the professions. So while there always appears to be cause for hope at the early end of the pipeline, it is very, very slow to feed through. Do you think the tide is turning, or we've got a long way to go?
I think we do have a long way to go. I think it's a lot of women, I can include myself in that. What my parents always said to me when I was growing up was, education is very, very important because someone can't take away what's in your head. You've learned something, it's yours, and that can never be taken away from you. So education was always pushed. And I think for women, that's a way to increase your social mobility. It was something that you could always do. Once schools were open for us to go to, you go to school. But there is a culture and there is a system in place that stops us from really reaching the kind of next level, the higher management. Well, it's International Women's Day. There was a report just released by UCU that there's still a gendered pay gap. It's not going away. If you just look on campus, terrible things, but like 1 in 7 female students will experience sexual violence on campus without university. The fact that a women campaign is even stronger, it really needs to be there because we're not protected by all these things happening, whether it's going into business or going to academia or just wanting to have the right over your body to walk down the street. And, you know, if, for example, something happened to you and you were going out and was a bit late, instead of saying, well, there's a problem with attacks or there's a problem with people attacking other people, we're told not to leave the house. And of course, we can't live our life that way. We can't not leave the house. I still have to go about. I still need to go to the shops. So I think more women going to university is fantastic, but we have to really keep these kind of events, International Women's Day, really strong women's campaigns at the forefront of everything we do because we can't forget and think it's all okay.
So it's interesting, the Margo comments on one female on Supreme Court. I think it has to be more than one, but you do get to a point where it starts to change. I mean, I'm quite hopeful. When I became Vice-Chancellor here, we're a member of the Russell Group of 24 universities. I was the only female Vice-Chancellor on that group. There are now 4. Now, you know, 1 or 2 will go, but from 4 we can go to 5 or 6. So, but 1, you know, you've got to get more than 1. It's got to, and actually the argument is on companies. There's quite a lot of research that companies with a third of females on the board are more successful than those with very few on the board. Now, what I don't know is if the women make it more successful or the companies are smarter and therefore they get more women on. So it may not be, we don't know which way round it is quite, but there is actually evidence. And I think it comes back to what you said about having a balance and having people with different approaches. So, I mean,
If I could add to that, I actually took the opportunity this weekend to speak to my nephew, actually, who now works in the States. And in the States, if you look at the number of female CEOs in big companies, companies that we'd all recognise, like Hewlett-Packard, for example, lots of those big, and he was just reeling off a list of companies that he knew with women as CEOs, and some with women as chairman and women CEOs. And it's actually quite enormous. We just don't seem to make that percentage here. Since, when I first, exactly the same, I was the first person in the London group of people doing what I was doing. I was the only woman for a very long time. Then it crept up. But actually recently, I actually did a count back in the same industry and actually discovered there were virtually no women CEOs anymore. It's gone backwards. So what is it that's happening that we are not getting women to carry on coming forward? Is that used to be the view that women got to a certain point and then just felt the boys' club was just too much like hard work to try and break into? They might as well go and work for themselves. I know a lot of women, very, very talented women, who've gone off into consultancy or who've gone off to start up their own business. But even again, if you look at the number of women in this country starting their own business, it's half as many as percentage-wise that start a business in the States. And in fact, I looked at the chart. If you want to look it up, it's in the Babson University 2012 report. It's quite interesting. I said 2012. If we had the same rate of women starting businesses as they do in America, we'd have 750,000 businesses owned by women today, more than we have now. It's a startling fact. And actually, we are way, way behind many of the North African countries, where places like Ghana and Nigeria, where women are actually starting businesses more frequently than men, where we're still only, for every business that's started by a woman here, there's 2 started still by a man. So we're just not getting, we are not getting that change that I think we probably all thought. I thought exactly the same. And when I was the president of Women in Management, the lady who started it in 1969 believed after 25 years there would be no need for women in management because women would have come forward. And of course, sadly, that is not the case. So we are not doing what some of our fellow countries, European countries, Scandinavian countries, Australia, for example, New Zealand, huge numbers more women making it to the top of organisations. So there's something about the culture in the UK, whether it's in law or whether it's in business, that somehow makes the blockage somewhere.
So one profession where I sense there is a change is an area where Margo's had a lot of dealings, which is in the health professions. There seems to have been quite a significant gender shift in health professions, medicine and so on in general. Has that been your experience?
Yes, I think that's so, and I think there are probably proportionately women are having more success in reaching the very top of the tree in medicine than they do currently in law. But I think women in both medicine and law, and perhaps all the traditional professions, face a particular problem, which is if you're going to move from being very good at what you do, a superb consultant whose patients adore you, whose team work with you readily, to be in the sort of higher echelons of management, you've got to do a lot more than be a good doctor or a good lawyer and produce good results. There's still this sort of emphasis on socialisation, doing the right thing, playing medical politics, playing legal politics. And that seems to me to be the point at which women, at the stage where it's really important to do that, probably don't have the time. We haven't mentioned the children thing. Indeed. But undoubtedly, the need to provide care for children, whatever we talk about shared paternal leave, at the moment in this country still falls more on the women. I've seen lots of my friends and lots of the young women, I've mentored lots of the young women who've been my students, have careers that were on an upward trajectory till they were 34, 35. They're still having very good careers in lots of ways. They're still highly respected. But they're not moving into the positions of power in the Law Society, the Bar Council, or I think in medicine. Because what they don't have, when they've finished at 6 o'clock, when the last student or the last patient has gone home, they've got to do other things. They haven't got all that amount of time to go to the dinners, to get their face known. So I think in both law and medicine, and I think it's true in accountancy too, the thing that tends to go when you have other commitments like children, or equally, I think, elderly parents, the thing that goes is not the core of your job, it's the being there, getting your face known.
So that's an interesting comment. This morning I opened a conference on Alzheimer's with 400 people in the town hall, and the first speaker, who was the minister for this area, pointed out that it was also International Women's Day, and pointed out first that more women have Alzheimer's than men, and secondly that 70% of carers for Alzheimer patients are women, even though there are more women with Alzheimer's than men, and that burden is taken. But I'd like to ask you, and I'll just start with Noah. I don't know how much experience you have of this, but I'm quite often asked, if you're in a very male-dominated world, which all of us have been, don't you feel scared going into a room where you're the only woman?
I would say yes, it's happened. Definitely when I took up my role, you'd go to, not only am I the youngest person in the room, but usually sometimes in some meetings you could be the only woman. And I think it's something about having that self-confidence to say, well, I'm just going to prepare. I usually prepare really well. So I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to say. And just having the confidence to speak once.
Very good.
To speak once and just say, well, this is what I want to say. And it's something that I think we need to do for more women, because we are so capable, we are so able. This thing of, I was reading a comment today, you know, on Facebook, there's always the commenters, there's always the people that troll things. And someone wrote, there was a gender pay gap article, and someone wrote, well, women should just be better. And I was like, that's really rude. We are very good, we are more than capable. It's about sometimes really giving ourselves the self-confidence to say, I'm very good. Men are very good at saying I'm very good, and we don't give ourselves enough credit, really, I think. So it's about, if you take the steps forwards that you need to really be able to feel confident in those rooms and just be the first one to speak, break the ice, and kind of assert yourself in a way that you can take ownership of that room.
So I never forget a story of a female colleague who is now quite senior in academia. And she was struggling in mid-career, partly for the reasons. She was invited to speak at a very, very prestigious conference in the United States, and she was absolutely delighted. She then got the programme. There were 10 speakers named, and they were all men. And then there was a slot that said, woman still to be found. And that was her. So I said, what did you do? She said, I accepted with good grace and made sure I gave the best talk of the lot. And she never looked back. So sometimes, actually, you must both have been in situations where you're the only woman.
That has become rarer and rarer.
It is, yeah.
At the beginning of my career, that's definitely so. I think the most frightening meeting I've ever been to was the Association of Orthopaedic Surgeons. I know some delightful orthopaedic surgeons, if there are any in the audience, but there wasn't a single woman in the room. All the men were actually very large.
Both eyes, obviously.
You're not that large, Margo.
I'm not that large. I went behind the lectern, and Nancy had told a story about me which is much the same, and I disappeared, so I had to stand on books. One of the people said, do you know, when I heard we were having a lawyer to speak, I didn't realise it was a woman. He had the programme in front of him. It said Margaret Rosier. I don't know any male Margarets, but maybe that's my...
You had that experience?
I once went to Oman with the Anglo-Arab Chamber of Commerce, and they wanted a woman speaker. And I felt a bit, I'm going to be the token woman, until I got there and realised I really was the token woman, and it was a hall about 4 times this size. And everybody on the platform, apart from me, was a man. Everybody in the audience was male. And I thought, my goodness, what am I going to do? And fortunately, the guy in front of me had put up a picture of his board of directors. And of course, they were all identical-looking men. And because it was the way the programme was structured, it was talking about structure of organisations. So I started and very slowly put up 3 pictures of women on my board who were all female. I didn't have any men on the board at the time. So there was a bit of a silence, and I said, well, you may notice there is a deliberate mistake here, that there are no men on my board. And there was a bit of a thought about it, and I said, and then a guy in the front row very kindly said, broke the ice by saying, are they all married? And I said, well, actually, the younger ones aren't. And he just as a joke to break the ice, said, well, I could offer 4 camels. But I think you're absolutely right. You've got the right technique. They call it the mouse in the meeting technique. where if you go into something where you are the only woman, and I've done it hundreds of times, is actually to be prepared, and be prepared to ask something, even if you're struggling a bit, even if it's only asking what time the break will be. And of course, the second rule for ladies in the audience, especially young ladies, never offer to pour the tea.
Oh, and I always do.
In a million years,
I always do.
Never offer to pour the tea.
I can't help it.
The next meeting, they'll be expecting you to do it.
I just can't help it, I always do. One of my worst experiences was many, many years ago, I gave the Christmas lectures, and you then do them in Japan for television, and I arrived and I was treated like royalty. It was absolutely fantastic. And then my hosts met me and said it was their great privilege to say that I had honorary male status for the course of my visit.
Like me in Oman.
Yeah. Anyway, that was a privilege and I took it. So we be thinking, because I'm going to be asking you for your questions in a moment, but I'm going to put one last question to each of you, and then we can discuss your questions. So the World Economic Forum estimates that at current rates, gender parity, this is across the world I think, will not be achieved until 2133. That's over 100 years from now. Can we wait that long? Is it true, or can we be quicker? I'll go that way first time. No, you can't wait that long.
I think it is true, because if it's across the world, you think about people in the global south, for example, the conditions are in. I think in this country, we have to remember we're quite privileged. All girls can go to school. We all go to school. Education's free. A lot of people don't have that. So I really believe in the kind of UN principles of UN Women, really trying to support women across the world, women and children, making sure that girls have education, girls are safe to go to school, girls have great healthcare, to really kind of flourish and have those qualities, because once we don't even have the basic care for people across the world, it's great if we have equality here, but it will never be the same across the world. So I do believe it. It's really sad. It makes you a bit depressed that I'll die before there's gender equality, but I might not die. Oh, no, I will. But old. Yeah, I'm really old. Oh, it'd be great. I was really old, and we had gender equality. I'd celebrate. But I think what we really need to do is take the position that we're in as people who are, in a country that has money. We all go to school, etc. Free healthcare, and make sure that we're really kind of giving back to those that don't have those opportunities, because that's what will raise the bar of the world.
Okay.
I'm afraid I agree. I think it's going to be very hard to make it happen any quicker than that. I think one of the things that we should all, I agree with absolutely everything you said, no, we should all press is how good this is going to be for everybody. I think sometimes it's presented as though if we have gender parity, it's only going to benefit women, and the poor old men are going to have to pay some terrible price for this. Yeah. And I don't think that's so. I think if the world is to flourish, then we actually have to have everybody who's involved in that world reaching the capacity of what they're able to do. What really, really worries me is whether, in fact, we're moving back. We look at certain parts of the world. We look at parts of the world where women aren't allowed to work. We look at parts of the world where women aren't allowed to access healthcare without the consent of their male guardian. I remember sort of thinking that through, and obviously being horrified by the fact that I'd have to have my husband's permission to go abroad, my husband's permission to go out, my husband's permission to get medical care. And then my daughter said something to me. She said, well, she was about 10 at the time, how would this work, Mummy, if Daddy were dead? Poor Daddy was killed off, like that. And I said, well, I guess my little brother would become my guardian. And I wouldn't be able to do any of these things without asking my little brother. Now, rationally, of course, the principle is just the same, whether it's my husband who's a guardian or my little brother. But the sort of implication, and that my mother, who was still alive, but had been a widow for years, would be controlled by her son. So I think there is an enormous amount to be done in order to try and achieve gender parity more quickly. I think we have to concentrate first on gender safety, and we have to appreciate, as Naa said, that we are very privileged here, and we have obligations to each other in this society, but also to the world as a whole, and that the participation of women will make the world a better place.
Well, we're all in total agreement. If I could just move it then to say, I wonder what the figure would be just for this country then. And maybe if we could focus on that, which we can do something about, I'm not saying we can't do something about the international situation. I think we can. But I think if we could focus on what does it mean for this country and what target, if we were setting a date, what would be that target date, I think that could be really important. Because although I've had two daughters, I've now got a grandchild, a female grandchild, you know, I'm wondering what life's going to be for her in 20 years' time, 30, 40, 50 years' time. You know, how are we bringing up, the other thing that's a focus, actually, I want to say is we focus a lot on how we bring up girls and how we bring up girls to think they can do everything. They can play football, they can do science, they can do anything they like. How are we bringing up the boys? And that, you know, having had friends who've been well educated, and I've seen the fact they don't really focus on the boys. And I think that's a mistake. I think that's a real mistake in how we're not going to achieve that unless we focus on how we bring up boys. I think that's a really important thing for us in the longer term.
So discussing female role models and the global challenges, we were fortunate enough just a few weeks ago to have a truly inspirational speaker. I don't know if any of you saw her, Winnie Byanyima, who is the chief executive of Oxfam. She came to this university as a refugee from Uganda, and she studied aeronautical engineering. And she is now a world leader on women's rights across the world. And I believe she will be back again later in the year, so you should come and see it. But now we're going to invite a few questions from the audience. And if you want to direct them at anybody specifically, please do, or if it's just general. So if you could wait for the microphone. Anybody want to ask a question? Yes, one in the middle.
Thank you. I graduated from law school in 2005. And I pursued the legal career, and now I'm working for international law firm.
Well done.
Thank you. And talking about the equality between the men and women, I think we cannot ignore a key factor is the family and the children. Now I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, and my colleagues, female colleagues, I think the most common topic we talk about is how to balance your family and your work. And there is a very, a famous Chinese business leader. She is a woman. And since she has a daughter, and her board meeting always having after her daughter goes to bed. But I don't think that can apply to all the women. And one of our female partners, she took a half-year sabbatical leave to figure out how her family gonna work. And eventually her husband decided to quit his job to support her. And then, so my question is how, if as women, we want to pursue our career, the children never gonna to be our excuse, but we fail to get to the top tier of the, like a senior management. But if that's our own choice, I don't think that's a feeling of our life, because we have the time with our family and be with the children. So I want to know your opinion about, as a woman, how to balance your life and with the work.
Thank you. So given that it's a law graduate, I'm going to ask Margo to answer that, and then we'll see the next one.
I think I've spent many, many years trying to puzzle that out. Just a few suggestions. The first thing I think that women and men have really got to campaign against in the workplace, wherever it is, whether you're the president of the university or in business, is this culture of overworking. It seems to me that in very many businesses, and I know it from the experience of some of my students, ex-students who've set up their own law firm, you can very often do what takes most people 5 days really well in 4 days. And they've set up their own firm where most of the women and the men who work there only work 4 days a week. They still get the same level of productivity, the same success in their legal, and that makes a huge difference to the balance between work and family. The other factor I think that we need to think about is the factor of age. Now, I got my chair at 39, and that was then thought to be quite young. Many, many people now are getting their chairs in their early 30s. That's problematic, I think, for many women, because it becomes to be the accepted thing. So let's say you make a choice. Let's say you work your socks off during your first 10 years, you establish a really good reputation. You pull back a little bit when your children are young. And then you're 40 and you're going to go back to full throttle, though I know it's still not that easy when you have teenagers. What will be said now, not necessarily in this university, but I've certainly heard it in other universities, 43 and not got a chair yet? What's wrong with her? 43 and not got a chair yet is because she, and it usually is she, has been devoting some of her time to her family. Very interestingly, I get asked regularly to assess promotion cases. The very first time I got a promotion case which said expressly, please take into account this person's parenting responsibilities, it related to a man. Very sad, his young wife had died very early and very prematurely. So it was quite right that that should be mentioned in the instructions given to me. But after all those cases, hundreds of which must have involved women who had children, the first time it was presented as something that had to be taken into account related to a man.
Another question? Yes, at the front, right on the front row.
Hi, I also graduated from law school 2013.
Oh my goodness. Have you brought them all?
Yeah.
Well, I've worked both in Ghana and I've worked a couple of years in the UK as well. And in most of the benefits packages you get as an employee, it says you can have a maternity leave for up to a year. And then you're required to report to the workplace every couple of months or so to say, I'm doing okay, I'll be back so and so time. But I'm yet to see a communication from the company to the woman on maternity leave to say, this position is available, would you like to apply? So if I went into work, I went into work with another gentleman who both started on the same day, similar role. If I went to on maternity leave for a whole year, by the time I came back, chances are he would have taken up that role and moved up the ladder. So is there any policy that we as women can push forward to say they should inform us of anything that happens in the workplace?
Yeah.
See, it's surprising because many years ago, one of the first organisations I ever saw who had clear policies for coming back to work or keeping in touch with women was actually sponsored by the King's Fund, which works with the NHS. And they did some research and they brought back the idea that really, really it was very, very important not to lose touch with the workplace by going in on a regular basis. And that was in the days before we had email and electronic newsletters and things like that. And I think that's, it's sad to think that that's still going on, that when we could do it so easily to say, here are the vacancies. I think one of the policies of my organisation, and I built an organisation that we had about 1,000 people working for us at one point, was that every vacancy was advertised to everybody, even to the receptionist or the cleaner, did not matter, everybody, including the people who weren't there, who were on sick leave or maternity leave or now paternity leave. And that was a simple policy for the organisation to adopt. Didn't cost anything, but it's actually about making sure, and I think some women I know are actually not very good, and they've got a lot of things going on at home, they've got a baby, they've got maybe 2 babies, they've got all sorts of things happening, and they're part of that responsibility to the employer to say, hi, I'm still here, what's happening, how are things going, can I pop in for an hour or two, not to show you the baby, but can I make an arrangement and pop in and spend half a day perhaps, just on that basis, is so crucial. And I wish more women would do that. We encouraged it at work, not many people took it up.
And a phased return as well.
And a phased return. Can you come back part-time? And I was saying to Dame Nancy earlier that one of the first women ever to job share a registrar's job in the National Health Service was a Manchester medic. Leslie Rees, who was here with me.
I know Leslie.
And Leslie
very well.
was the first, her and her colleague were the
She
first
became
women
professor.
ever to job search. She's just become a professor at UCL.
Yeah.
So I think it's about both. I think it's about the employer, but it's also about us. And I think it's very easy to say that's the employer's job to do that. I think sometimes we have to do something as well.
Any other question? One here. We'll take 2 quick questions and 2 quick answers, and then I'll let Janine. Yes, yeah, thank you.
I came from Portugal after a physics degree there to do a PhD in Manchester in physics. In 1972, came to work on lasers, which were really a very new thing, and was just understanding how materials lays, not the applications. Nowadays we know what has happened to that area of search.
Can we do short? No, sorry, just if you could just come to your question, that would be really helpful, thank you.
The first one is, I know that Manchester has about 20% of women in science degrees and research. How many of those that make that 20% are from abroad, not from British-made population? And the second is, women have a different approach into research, into doing research. God knows what would be found if more women were into that area of finding. God knows how far or how different the achievements and the final results would be if more women were involved in that aim.
Thank you. I mean, I'll perhaps take this. The second comment, I would just agree with you. On the balance, I'm afraid the answer to your question is it depends. It's very subject specific. At undergraduate level, in life sciences and medicine, women are far, far more than men. In engineering, far less. As you move into staff and researchers, then it tends to switch and there are fewer women. I don't know how many of those are from outside the UK, other than to say that of our staff, about 25% are non-UK born. I don't think there's a significantly different proportion of them that are women and men, but I don't have the number on that, so I can't answer. So we'll take one more very quick one just behind you. If you could just do a short question and we'll do a short answer and then we'll let you enjoy some refreshments.
Thank you. A very short question. How do you think that gender stereotypes affect the young children in terms of actually measuring their ambitions and what they want to go on to do? They might want to be an astronaut on day one and they get it knocked out of them by those stereotypes that they meet in early years at school.
Well, I can certainly say in science, if you ask most children to draw a scientist, they almost always draw a man, and they almost always look like Albert Einstein.
I think gender stereotypes are really, really important. A great example is my mum, she moved here from Ghana in the 90s, and she didn't get the whole pink is for girls, blue is for boys. Her favourite colour was blue, so I wore all blue clothes. I was that girl, and I remember there was a woman on the bus who was like, "You're a very smart boy," and I was like, "I'm not a boy, I'm a girl." I think being able to just let children be children, explore everything, and not stereotype them, buy only girls' dolls, only boys can wear, play with trucks, is really important to raising your ability and your aspiration to do whatever you wanted. I went to an only girls' school, and there we didn't even think about what was the subjects that girls or boys should do. We all just did what we were passionate about. So whether you were a drama kid or a science or physics person, it didn't really matter because gender wasn't a part of your passion. It was just, I'm good at this and I want to do. And I think that's something that we should really be enforcing in all kind of young people in how they're brought up.
Thank you. So I'm going to hand over to Janine Watson, who's chair of our Alumni Advisory Board. I think has a last question.
Thank you very much, Nancy. So I get the chance to ask the last question tonight before we have our refreshments. And I'd like to put all the panel, including Nancy, on the spot, please. If you had one piece of advice that you could give to either young women today or to yourself when you were starting your career, what would that one piece of advice be?
I guess I'll start. My piece of advice would be try everything. If you want to do it and you think, and not even if you think you'll be good at it, if you want to do it and there's something in you that goes, that might be interesting, just do it. Because you'll never know what that'll bring. You might lead on to really amazing things, and if you don't take the risk, then you'll never kind of reap the benefits of it. So just try everything.
Margo?
I would agree with that, but I'd add one other thing which sounds as though it's a complete contradiction. Learn to say no. Women are very, very bad at saying no. We tend to say, oh, I'd love to do that, but I can't do it next Wednesday.
I'll do it on Thursday.
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
Totally agree. That's why we're here. We didn't say no.
I'm not allowed to say no to Kate.
I think mine would be to, all right, something completely different is to trust your emotional intelligence. I actually firmly believe that women have a high degree of emotional intelligence. And I can tell, over a drink, I can give you hundreds of examples of times when I've said, I think we should do this. And everybody in the board has gone, no, let's not do that. And actually I've said, I can't even explain it, but I just feel that way to go, or that project, or that thing is absolutely right. It feels right, and I'm drawn to that. And 99.9% of the time, that's been right. By the time I've been talked out of it, disastrous. So women, there is such a thing as emotional intelligence, and I think we need to learn to trust it. Don't apologise for it. Trust it.
Thank you. So I'm very, very similar, and I was asked the same question in an interview, and I can't remember saying this, and I probably got it from somewhere else, but I simply said, listen to your head, but follow your heart, which is very much similar to what the others are saying.
Well, thank you very much for those answers to those questions. It's been a fascinating night, and I think the conversations will go on for some time yet. On behalf of all the alumni here and the other guests, thank you very much. You're certainly not allowed to say no at the moment because we have some small tokens of appreciation for you panel members. And I'd like to ask everybody in the room, please, to put your hands together for all our guests. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I just have one final very pleasant task, which is to ask you all to the top end of the room where we have some refreshments. So if you'd like to make your way there, we can continue the conversations. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for coming.